Chapter 1. The Encounter. The grand ballroom of the prestigious Kane Tower glittered with opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung high above, casting a golden glow over the elite of the business world. Alexander Kane, the enigmatic billionaire CEO, stood at the heart of the crowd. His sharp black suit tailored to perfection, his piercing silver eyes scanning the room with quiet authority. Though his presence was commanding, an aura of mystery clung to him, making him untouchable. Kai Weston adjusted the cufflinks of his navy blue suit, his jaw tight with determination. This gala was his chance to secure an investment for his gym chain. As an alpha, he was used to commanding attention, but the sheer scale of luxury and power in the room made him feel oddly small. "Remember why you're here," Kai muttered to himself, clutching his business proposal tighter. When Alexander's gaze locked onto him, it was as if the room stilled. Kai felt it immediately, a warmth, a pull, a primal instinct that made his breath hitch. He'd heard about Alexander Kane, the enigma whose brilliance and charm left even the most powerful alphas speechless. But he'd never imagined the man's presence would be so overwhelming. Alexander smirked slightly, as if reading Kai's thoughts. Without breaking eye contact, he excused himself from his circle of admirers and strode toward Kai. "You look like a man with a mission," Alexander said, his deep voice smooth as silk. Kai blinked, scrambling to steady himself under the weight of Alexander's presence. I'm Kai Weston. I run a chain of gyms, and I was hoping to discuss a potential investment with you." Alexander's gaze flickered with amusement. "A bold move, approaching me directly. I like that." Kai swallowed hard, the faint scent of Alexander's cologne making his pulse race. There was something unexplainably alluring about him, something that made Kai want to step closer and pull away at the same time. "Well," Kai replied, forcing confidence into his tone, "I believe in being straightforward." Alexander leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And I admire that. Let's discuss this in private." Kai followed Alexander to a secluded corner of the room, feeling as though he was walking into a lion's den. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. As Alexander began asking questions about Kai's business, his tone was professional, but his eyes never wavered from Kai's face. Every word out of Kai's mouth seemed to amuse him, and yet there was a keen interest there, as if he wasn't just listening to the pitch, but studying the man in front of him. "You're quite passionate about this," Alexander finally said, his lips curling into a small smile. "I can see why your clients trust you." Kai felt heat rise to his cheeks under the compliment. "I believe in what I do." "And I believe in investing in potential," Alexander replied smoothly. He leaned back, his gaze now more intense. "But I must admit there's something else about you, Kai. Something unique." Kai froze under the weight of Alexander's words. The way Alexander looked at him, as though he could see through every layer of his being, sent a shiver down his spine. "Do you always make your guests feel this interrogated?" Kai quipped, attempting to mask his unease. Alexander's smirk deepened. "Only the interesting ones." Before Kai could respond, Alexander's assistant interrupted, reminding him of his next appointment. Alexander rose, his towering presence making Kai feel even smaller. I'll consider your proposal," Alexander said, his tone decisive. "And I'll be in touch soon. But I suspect we'll be seeing each other again, Mr. Weston." Kai nodded, watching Alexander disappear into the crowd. His heart pounded and his mind raced with questions he didn't dare ask. As he left the gala, Kai couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a turn he wasn't prepared for, and that Alexander Kane was going to be at the center of it. Chapter 2. The Pursuit. Kai couldn't get Alexander Kane out of his mind. Days after the gala, he kept replaying their interaction in his head. The piercing gaze, the commanding presence, and the cryptic promise of seeing him again. It was both unsettling and thrilling, a feeling Kai couldn't explain. He tried to focus on work, drowning himself in meetings and gym operations. But even then, the thought of Alexander lingered like an itch he couldn't scratch. That's why when an email arrived from Kane Enterprises inviting him to a private dinner, his heart skipped a beat. The email was concise, yet it carried the weight of authority. "Mr. Weston, I'd like to discuss your proposal in detail. Dinner at 7 p.m. Alexander Kane." There was no RSVP request, just an address to an exclusive rooftop restaurant. It was an invitation Kai couldn't refuse, even if he wanted to. The restaurant was as lavish as Kai expected, perched high above the city with glittering lights stretching out in all directions. The atmosphere was intimate, with soft music playing in the background. Alexander was already there when Kai arrived, seated at a private table, his sharp suit emphasizing his broad shoulders and the air of confidence he exuded. "You're punctual," Alexander remarked, standing as Kai approached. His silver eyes glinted in the candlelight. Kai offered a polite nod, taking the seat Alexander gestured to. "You don't keep someone like you waiting." Alexander's lips curved into a faint smile. "Smart answer." Dinner began with small talk, but Alexander's probing questions soon turned the conversation back to business. He asked about Kai's vision, his goals, and his competitors. Yet, beneath the surface, there was something unspoken, a tension that made Kai hyper-aware of every word, every glance. As the main course was served, Alexander leaned back, his fingers lightly tapping the edge of his glass. "You're ambitious, Kai. I respect that. But there's something else about you. Something that intrigues me." Kai's brows furrowed. "I'm not sure I follow." Alexander's gaze darkened, a hint of something primal flashing in his eyes. "I've met many alphas, but none quite like you. Your scent. It's different." Kai stiffened, suddenly feeling exposed. He tried to mask his discomfort with a casual laugh. "Is that your way of saying I need a better cologne?" Alexander smirked, but his tone grew more serious. "Don't deflect. You felt it too, didn't you?" "At the gala." Kai's heart raced. He had felt it, that unexplainable pull, like a magnet drawing him closer to Alexander. But he couldn't admit it, not when he barely understood it himself. "I don't know what you're talking about," Kai lied, reaching for his water to avoid Alexander's piercing gaze. Alexander leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You're drawn to me, and I can't seem to get you out of my head." The confession caught Kai off guard. He stared at Alexander, unsure whether to feel flattered or alarmed. "Why me? You could have anyone you want." Alexander's expression softened, though his eyes burned with intensity. "I don't want just anyone. I want you." Kai's breath hitched. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. But before he could respond, Alexander shifted gears, his tone returning to business. "I'll approve the investment," Alexander said, as if their previous exchange hadn't happened. "But there's a condition." Kai frowned, his mind still reeling. "What condition?" "You'll report directly to me. I want to oversee this personally." Kai's instincts screamed that this was about more than business, but he couldn't afford to turn down the opportunity. He nodded slowly. "If that's what it takes, I'll agree." Alexander's smile returned, this time with a hint of satisfaction. "Good. I'll have the contract sent to your office tomorrow." As the dinner ended, Alexander escorted Kai to the elevator. The silence between them was thick with tension, and when the doors closed, Alexander stepped closer. "One more thing," Alexander said, his voice low and deliberate. "You can deny it all you want, but this connection between us is real, and I intend to explore it." Kai's breath caught as Alexander's hand brushed his, the touch sending a spark through his body. Before he could respond, the elevator doors opened, and Alexander stepped out, leaving Kai alone to process the whirlwind of emotions coursing through him. Back at home, Kai paced his living room, his mind racing. He didn't want to admit it, but Alexander was right. There was something undeniable between them, something that both excited and terrified him. Little did Kai know Alexander's pursuit was just beginning, and there was no escaping the bond they were destined to share. Chapter 3. The Bonding. The next few weeks passed in a blur of meetings, business deals, and constant encounters with Alexander. The more Kai saw him, the more undeniable the connection became. Alexander was persistent, his attention unwavering, and despite Kai's best efforts to keep things professional, the attraction was growing into something far more intense. It all came to a head one evening when Kai was invited to Alexander's penthouse for what was supposed to be a casual dinner meeting. There was no denying the underlying tension when they spoke, but this time something felt different. Alexander was unusually quiet as Kai sat across from him, the soft glow of the chandelier above them casting shadows over his features. "Are you sure you're just here for business?" Kai asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Alexander's silver eyes gleamed as they locked onto Kai's. He didn't answer immediately, instead standing up and walking toward Kai. The air between them seemed to crackle, the charge of their unspoken emotions building with every step. "You felt it, haven't you?" Alexander's voice was low, barely above a whisper, yet it resonated deep in Kai's chest. This pull. This connection. Kai stood, his heart hammering in his chest. "I don't know what you're talking about," he lied, his voice shaking just slightly. Alexander's gaze darkened, and before Kai could react, he was suddenly pressed against the wall. His breath hitched in surprise, the hard heat of Alexander's body against his sending a shock through his entire being. "I can see right through you, Kai," Alexander growled, his lips brushing against the side of Kai's neck. "You've been denying it, but I know what you want, and I'll make sure you understand that it's not something you can fight." Kai's pulse raced. His alpha instincts screamed at him to push Alexander away, to maintain control, but his body betrayed him. The overwhelming need to be close to Alexander was too strong. Kai's breath was shallow, his hands instinctively gripping Alexander's broad shoulders as he tried to steady himself. Alexander's lips were suddenly at his ear, his breath hot, as he whispered, "You're mine, Kai. I've claimed you the moment we met, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Before Kai could respond, Alexander moved faster than he anticipated. His teeth sank into Kai's gland, biting down hard, marking him in a way that left no room for denial. A jolt of heat shot through Kai's body at the searing pain and pleasure that followed the bite. His legs nearly buckled under the weight of it, and his grip tightened around Alexander's shoulders, pulling him closer. The sensation was overwhelming, familiar yet foreign, like a wave crashing over him. He tried to fight it, to tell himself this was wrong, but all his instincts were screaming the opposite. "Let go, Kai," Alexander murmured, his voice low and commanding. "Feel it. You're mine now." Kai's body responded before his mind could. The pulse of heat that spread from his neck, down through his chest, and into his very core was undeniable. The bond was forming. He could feel it, the bond between an enigma and an alpha, something stronger than anything he'd ever experienced. Kai gasped, his head spinning as the pressure from Alexander's bite intensified. He tried to pull away, but Alexander's grip on him tightened, keeping him in place as the sharpness of the bite pierced deeper. A wave of pleasure mixed with pain flooded Kai, and before he could stop himself, a soft moan slipped from his lips. Alexander didn't release him immediately, continuing to drink in the connection between them. He pulled back slightly, licking the wound as though savoring the taste of Kai's blood, and Kai shuddered under the sensation. "I knew you'd come around," Alexander said, his voice thick with satisfaction. "Now that you're marked, you'll understand. We're bound, Kai. You belong to me, and I belong to you." Kai's chest rose and fell with quick, uneven breaths as he tried to process what had just happened. His body still throbbed with the aftershocks of the bite, the powerful lingering effects of the bond they had just sealed. I didn't want this," Kai whispered, his voice shaky, though there was no denying the confusion and, yes, the undeniable need in his words. Alexander's eyes softened for a brief moment, a rare flicker of tenderness, showing through the possessiveness that usually clouded his expression. "You don't have to want it, Kai. This is fate, and you'll learn to trust me, to trust us." Kai didn't respond, unable to find the words. His mind was a whirl of emotions, anger, confusion, desire, all tangled together in a knot he couldn't untangle. But deep down, beneath the surface of his resistance, something shifted. He didn't want to admit it, but the connection was real. The bond was undeniable, and no matter how much he fought it, he could already feel his body and mind beginning to yield to it. "Rest," Alexander said softly, his voice now calm, though still carrying that possessive edge. "You'll need it. We have a lot to figure out." Kai didn't argue. As much as he wanted to walk away, to leave everything behind, he couldn't move. His body was still too affected, too tied to Alexander's touch. And as Alexander held him close, Kai realized that the path ahead was no longer just his to choose. Chapter 4. The Obsession. The days following the bite were a haze for Kai, the mark on his gland now healing, pulsed with a constant reminder of what had transpired. Every time he caught a glimpse of his reflection, he saw the faint trace of Alexander's teeth beneath his skin, a symbol of the bond they'd forged. He couldn't shake it, no matter how hard he tried. His body ached for Alexander, as if the very essence of his being had been branded by the enigma. At first, Kai had tried to push Alexander away, to ignore the tug in his chest that seemed to pull him back toward the billionaire. He kept busy with his gym and his clients, but every meeting, every night spent alone in his apartment, only reminded him of the connection he couldn't escape. His thoughts constantly returned to the way Alexander had touched him, how his presence alone made Kai's pulse quicken, how every word seemed to wrap around him like a chain. Alexander wasn't making it easy. Every day a new message arrived from him, texts, calls, and sometimes even cryptic notes delivered by his assistant. "Have you thought about us? I'm waiting for you, Kai." The messages were constant, insistent, and each time Kai found himself replying, even when he swore he wouldn't. The obsession was mutual. Alexander made sure Kai knew it. He would show up unexpectedly at the gym, offering unsolicited advice, or he'd invite Kai to lunches that felt more like subtle tests. Alexander's eyes would linger on him too long, his words too careful, his touch too possessive. The more he saw Kai, the more his hunger for him seemed to grow, and Kai couldn't deny that it affected him. It wasn't just Alexander's obsession with him. Kai was starting to feel the pull too, a constant need that gnawed at him. Every time he tried to ignore it, to fight against the bond that had already taken root, the pressure only intensified. One evening, Kai stood in his gym, finishing his last set of reps, trying to clear his mind of the day's chaos. His body was exhausted, the sweat glistening on his skin. The rhythmic sound of his breath was the only thing he could focus on when the door to the gym opened with a soft creak. He turned, startled to see Alexander walking in. "Alex," Kai began, but the words died in his throat as Alexander approached him without hesitation, his movements graceful, purposeful. "I couldn't stay away," Alexander said quietly, his voice low, but filled with an intensity that Kai knew all too well now. "You've been avoiding me, Kai." Kai's heart raced, both from the closeness and the truth in Alexander's words. He couldn't deny that he had been avoiding the inevitable, but there was something about Alexander's presence, his magnetic pull, that made it hard to breathe, let alone think clearly. "I'm not avoiding you," Kai lied, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "I've just been busy." "Liar." Alexander's voice was sharp, but there was a softness beneath the harshness that Kai couldn't place. He took a step forward, closing the space between them until their bodies were nearly touching. "You think you can hide from me? That you can run from this?" Kai's breath hitched as Alexander's hand grazed the side of his neck, his touch sending a spark of heat through his skin. The pulse at the base of Kai's neck throbbed in response. The mark Alexander had left still fresh in his senses. He could feel the pressure mounting in his chest, the undeniable ache for Alexander's touch. "I don't want this," Kai said, his voice barely above a whisper. But even as he spoke, his body betrayed him. He wanted Alexander. He needed him. He couldn't fight the bond any longer. Alexander didn't reply with words. Instead, his lips descended on Kai's neck, just above the mark, and he bit down again, not as hard as before, but enough to send a shock of heat straight through Kai's body. A strangled gasp escaped Kai's throat as his knees wobbled, his hands automatically reaching for Alexander's shoulders for support. "This is happening, Kai," Alexander murmured against his skin, his breath hot. "You can't run from it. You're mine." A wave of pleasure and submission rushed through Kai. It was a rush of heat that was both terrifying and thrilling at the same time. He could feel the bond pulling him deeper, and despite his initial resistance, a part of him welcomed it. Alexander had claimed him, and there was no going back. "I never wanted to be claimed," Kai whispered, but his body was already responding to Alexander's every touch. "But you're making me feel things I can't control." Alexander chuckled darkly, lifting his head to meet Kai's gaze. "You don't need to control it, Kai. Let go. Trust me." Kai's heart raced as he stared at Alexander, feeling the weight of the words and the force of the bond that was now undeniable. His instincts screamed at him to yield, to surrender to what was happening between them. Alexander's possessiveness was suffocating, but it was also intoxicating. Kai wanted more, even though he feared what it meant. "I don't know if I can trust you," Kai said, his voice shaking. Alexander's smile softened, but there was still an edge to it, a quiet promise. "You will. I'll make you see. I'll make you understand that this, we, is meant to be." Kai's body hummed with the intensity of the moment. He had no choice but to give in. Whether he wanted to or not, he was bound to Alexander now, and as much as he tried to deny it, a part of him longed for the moment when he could stop fighting and let the bond take control. Chapter 5. Revelation. The weight of what was happening was beginning to settle heavily on Kai. Each day felt like he was walking through a fog, the pull toward Alexander stronger than ever, his mind and body in constant turmoil. The bite had left more than a physical mark. It had carved itself into his very being. Alexander's presence, his touch, were no longer just an attraction. It was as if his very essence had been woven into Kai's soul, a bond that no amount of resistance could break. Kai was used to being in control of his life, of his emotions, but ever since that night in Alexander's penthouse, it was as if control had slipped through his fingers like sand. The more he fought against the inevitable, the more he felt himself being drawn into Alexander's world, his obsession. It had been a few days since their last encounter, and Kai had thrown himself into work, hoping it would distract him. He couldn't deny that part of him was grateful for the investment Alexander had made in his gym business. But it was hard to focus when every interaction with the enigmatic billionaire left him more confused and lost. That night, as Kai sat at his desk, he received another text. This one wasn't cryptic like the others. It was straightforward, yet it sent a chill through him. "Meet me at the rooftop. I need to explain something to you. It's time you understand." Kai's heart skipped a beat. He knew what this meant. It wasn't just about business anymore. It never had been. The rooftop was cold when Kai arrived, the wind biting at his skin. The city lights below shimmered like stars, a stark contrast to the darkness that enveloped the rooftop. Alexander was standing by the railing, staring out at the skyline. He was dressed in his usual impeccable suit, but there was something different about the way he carried himself tonight. The air around him felt heavier, more charged. "Kai," Alexander said without turning around, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of something deeper. "I knew you'd come." Kai's breath caught in his throat, his feet carrying him toward Alexander without thinking. "What is this? What's going on, Alex?" Alexander turned to face him then, his silver eyes glinting with an intensity that took Kai's breath away. There was a dangerous edge to him tonight, something in the way he looked at Kai that made him feel exposed. "You need to understand, Kai," Alexander said, his voice soft but filled with purpose. "What happened between us? It's not just a random event. This isn't just about me claiming you." Kai frowned, confused. "I don't understand. What is it you're trying to tell me?" Alexander stepped closer, his proximity making Kai's pulse quicken. He could feel the tension between them, thick and suffocating, as if the very air was charged with their unspoken connection. "You've been resisting this," Alexander continued, his voice low. "But you can't deny it. The bond, the pull, it's part of who we are, part of what we are." Kai's confusion deepened, but he couldn't bring himself to back away from Alexander, not with the heat growing between them. "What do you mean by what we are?" Alexander's gaze hardened, a flicker of something ancient and possessive flashing in his eyes. "I'm an enigma, Kai. And you—" He paused, as if weighing the words carefully. "You're an alpha, but you're different. You're the one I've been waiting for." Kai felt a chill run through him. "An enigma?" Alexander nodded. "We're rare, unique. Enigmas like me are capable of something no one else can do. Something that goes beyond just claiming an alpha." "I can make an alpha pregnant, Kai. You're the one who will carry my child." The words hit Kai like a punch to the gut. His head spun as he tried to process what Alexander had just said. The idea was ludicrous, impossible, and yet there was something in Alexander's eyes, something that told Kai that he wasn't lying. You're telling me that I'm going to—" Kai's voice faltered, disbelief flooding his system. "Yes," Alexander interrupted, his tone firm and sure. "You're the one I've chosen. The one I've marked. Our bond is not just about possession or desire, Kai. It's about something deeper, something that only happens once in a lifetime." Kai's knees felt weak. The words felt like a dream, or a nightmare. He wasn't sure which. Everything about this felt impossible. He'd never heard of anything like it before. An enigma, an alpha carrying a child. But in that moment, he couldn't deny the truth of it. Not with the way his body had responded to Alexander. He had felt the pull, the overwhelming desire, and the way his very essence seemed to connect with Alexander's. You've been chosen to bear my child, Kai. And this bond between us? It's not just physical, it's fate. Alexander stepped closer, his fingers grazing Kai's jaw, forcing him to meet his gaze. You can fight it, resist it, but in the end, it's inevitable. You'll come to accept it, and when you do, you'll understand why this is the way it was always meant to be. Kai's heart raced as everything Alexander had said washed over him. He didn't know how to respond. Didn't know if he could even begin to understand what Alexander was telling him, but the pressure in his chest, the pulsing need that had been growing inside him since their first meeting, was growing stronger. Why me? Kai finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why choose me? Alexander's gaze softened for the first time, his fingers gently brushing Kai's skin. Because you're the one who completes me, Kai. You've always been the one. And now we'll begin something that will change everything. Kai wanted to argue, to run, to do anything to escape this reality, but the truth was staring him in the face, and deep down he knew there was no escaping it. The bond had already been sealed. Chapter 6. The Climax and Resolution. The weeks following the revelation were a whirlwind for Kai. He tried to convince himself that it was all a misunderstanding, that Alexander was just playing some kind of twisted game, but deep down Kai knew it was more than that. Every time he tried to distance himself, every time he tried to push Alexander away, he found himself drawn back into the billionaire's orbit. The bond that had been forged between them during that night on the penthouse rooftop had taken root deep inside him. Kai couldn't deny it any longer. He had been marked, not just by Alexander's bite, but by the force of their connection. He had tried to focus on his business, to keep his mind occupied, but the idea of carrying Alexander's child, of becoming something more than just an alpha, weighed heavily on him. He had spent nights lying awake, his body aching for Alexander's touch, his mind racing with questions. Could he accept this? Could he truly embrace the bond that had been forced upon him? Was he ready to become the bearer of Alexander's child? It all came to a head one evening when Alexander came to visit him at his apartment. The moment the door swung open and Alexander stepped inside, the air seemed to thicken, charged with an electricity that Kai couldn't ignore. He could feel the familiar pull toward Alexander, like a magnetic force that he couldn't resist. Kai, Alexander said softly, his voice filled with an unsettling calm. We need to talk. Kai swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. I'm done talking, Alex. I don't know what to do with all this. What do you expect me to say? Alexander stepped closer, his silver eyes never leaving Kai's. I know this is overwhelming for you, but you don't have a choice. You never did. I never asked for this, Kai shot back, his voice breaking. You never gave me a chance to say no. You marked me, you claimed me, and now you expect me to just accept it? The words were harsh, but they were born of frustration, of confusion, of a deep inner conflict that had been raging inside Kai for far too long. I never asked you to accept it immediately, Alexander replied quietly, but you have to trust me, Kai. This is something bigger than us. It's fate. You are the one I've chosen, and the bond between us isn't something that can be undone. Kai stood frozen, staring at him, the weight of those words sinking in. He was right. There was no going back. It wasn't just about desire or passion anymore. It was about something more. Something that tied them together. Something that had been set in motion the moment they met. I can't stop thinking about it, Kai admitted, his voice barely a whisper. I can't stop thinking about you. And it terrifies me. Alexander's gaze softened, and for the first time in their tumultuous relationship, Kai saw something vulnerable in the billionaire's eyes. I don't want to terrify you, Kai. I want to show you that we're meant for each other. This bond, it's something that only a few enigmas experience. And when it happens, it's not just a connection between two people. It's the beginning of something new, something extraordinary. Kai's chest tightened as the truth of Alexander's words hit him like a tidal wave. There was no escaping this. No running away from the bond that had already taken hold of him. He could resist all he wanted, but deep down, he knew he couldn't fight it forever. I'm scared, Alex, Kai admitted, his voice breaking. What if I can't handle it? What if I'm not ready to carry your child? What if I... Before Kai could finish his sentence, Alexander reached out, pulling him into his arms. His touch was gentle, but firm, as if reassuring him that everything would be okay. "You're stronger than you think, Kai," Alexander said softly, his lips brushing against Kai's forehead. "We'll go through this together. I'll be with you every step of the way. I'm not asking you to do this alone." The sincerity in Alexander's voice, the warmth of his embrace, calmed the storm inside Kai's chest. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to breathe, to relax, and to let go of the fear that had been consuming him. The truth was undeniable. This was their fate, and no matter how much he tried to deny it, he was already bound to Alexander. The bond between them wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, and something far deeper. Kai realized with a clarity that shocked him that he wasn't just carrying Alexander's child. He was carrying their future. Alexander pulled back slightly, his silver eyes searching Kai's face for any signs of hesitation. "You don't have to be afraid, Kai. We're in this together." Kai met his gaze, his heart racing, and for the first time he felt at peace with the bond. The fear that had once gripped him began to dissipate, replaced by a quiet acceptance. The road ahead would be difficult, but it would also be theirs to walk together. "I'm ready," Kai whispered, his voice steady now, his hands resting against Alexander's chest. "Let's do this. Together." Alexander's lips curved into a soft smile as he gently cupped Kai's face. "Together, Kai. Always." The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, doubts, and obstacles to overcome. But Kai knew one thing for certain: he wasn't alone anymore. He had Alexander by his side, and with their bond they would face whatever came their way, together. And so their journey began, not as just an alpha and an enigma, but as partners bound by fate, love, and the promise of a future that would change everything. Epilogue: A New Beginning. The sun had just begun to set, casting a golden glow over the sprawling cityscape below. From the balcony of their penthouse, Kai gazed out at the view, his hand resting on the growing curve of his abdomen. It had been several months since he had fully embraced the bond with Alexander, and life had settled into a rhythm that felt right, that felt whole. He was no longer just Kai, the independent alpha. He was a father-to-be, and in that moment, he couldn't have been happier. Behind him, he heard the soft sound of footsteps, followed by a gentle voice that never failed to send warmth through his chest. "You're still up here." Alexander's voice was both familiar and comforting as he joined Kai on the balcony, his presence always a steadying force. Kai smiled as he turned toward him, his heart swelling with love for the man who had once seemed like an unreachable enigma. "I was just thinking about everything, about us, about our future." Alexander smiled, his hand brushing Kai's back before settling protectively over his abdomen. "I've been thinking the same thing, and I'm glad that we've come this far." They had faced challenges, of course, doubts, fears, and the pressure of the bond that had initially overwhelmed Kai, but with each passing day, they had only grown stronger. Alexander's possessiveness, once a source of tension, had become a form of protection. And the more Kai let go of his fears, the more he realized just how deeply Alexander cared for him. Now, with their child growing inside him, the future felt full of promise. Kai placed his hand over Alexander's, savoring the warmth between them. "I never thought I could be this happy, Alex. You've changed everything for me." "You've changed everything for me, too," Alexander replied softly, his voice filled with genuine emotion. "I never thought I'd find someone like you. Someone who could not only handle the bond, but also make me feel complete." Kai's heart fluttered at the words. He had come to understand that their connection wasn't just about physical attraction, or even the deep bond of the Enigma and Alpha. It was about something deeper, a partnership that made them both better, stronger. Together they were unstoppable. The sound of a small cry broke the moment, and both men turned toward the nursery door. "That's our little one," Kai said with a grin, his heart racing with excitement. Alexander chuckled softly. "I think someone is ready to meet their fathers." Together they walked to the nursery, where their newborn daughter lay in her crib, her small hands reaching up as she cooed. The baby had Alexander's silver eyes and Kai's dark hair, a perfect combination of both of them. Kai's heart swelled with pride as he picked her up, cradling her gently in his arms. "Look at her, Alex. She's everything we dreamed of." Alexander stood beside them, his hand resting on Kai's shoulder, looking down at their child with a tenderness that Kai had never seen in him before. She's perfect. The bond between them had led them to this moment, the moment where their love had created something truly beautiful. Their daughter, a symbol of their future, was a living testament to the journey they had taken together. "We did it, Kai," Alexander said softly, his voice full of awe. "This is only the beginning." Kai nodded, his gaze fixed on their daughter as she slowly fell asleep in his arms. "I know, and I'm ready for whatever comes next." The love they shared, the bond that had brought them together, was just the beginning of their family's journey. There would be more challenges, more obstacles to face, but with each other by their side, they knew they could handle anything that came their way. As Alexander gently kissed Kai's forehead, he whispered, "Together, always." And with that, their new life began, one filled with love, growth, and a family that would be their everything.